I hope we're going live. We have put together this event and we're hoping that you can join us from YouTube, from Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, of course. So I'm here with a really trusty sidekick of Vlad, who's going to be working in the background with helping to field some of your questions and helping to direct me. I've never done a stream on multiple platforms, so if you see me looking to the side, it's just because I'm trying to keep track of a few different moving pieces and parts. I'm really, really looking forward to sharing some insight and some learnings with you on our hiring process at Convert.com. So let me just take a quick look here and see if we have everything up and running, and then I'll jump right in. Just a second. Alrighty, so I see that it looks like we're good to go on Facebook, and we'll take a look here and see how we're doing. Vlad, I've got my Slack open, so if you need to chat with me, please feel free to do that. Well, I won't be chatting with you, but I'll see your notification. And let's just see here. Okay, I think we're good. So what I'm going to do now is all right, I see that. We're good to go. All right, so I'm going to introduce myself then first. How about that? So my name is Morgan, Morgan Legge. I'm located in Montreal, Canada. I am the head of organizational change at Convert.com. Convert is an A/B testing and personalization tool for enterprise businesses and agencies. So you might ask yourself, well, why is a SaaS company concerned about this or thinking about this or sharing knowledge about this? And the reason being is that we believe great work belongs to everyone. So it's really important for us to keep iterating on creating the right kind of workplace. The reality is that will be different for every business, but we, as people in our prime, we're going to spend the majority of our waking hours at work. So it's really, really important that we try to get that right. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the process that I architected and installed at Convert. I've been here for 6 years. Currently don't work in hiring or any part of the hiring pipeline. So if you're looking to get a job with us, please just follow the links on our linked on our website. If you go to Convert.com and then look for jobs, you'll find that information there, and it's pretty clearly laid out. So enough about me. I will share my screen. I'll go into a presentation, and I hope that you'll have questions about that. Vlad will let me know. I'm happy to take a few little breaks to answer any points of clarification. And then at the end, I'll summarize, and we'll then take open floor questions about anything related to hiring, anything that you saw in the presentation, bias, remote work, meetings, organizational change, productivity, any of these very, very important topics. So let's get started. All right, so let me share my screen. Just a second. This is not the right screen. There we go. Okay, so we're going to do this as a slideshow. Let me just double check that we are doing this correctly. And I don't see myself in it, but that's okay. All right, so Here we go. Let's get started. So, you're here to find out about how small remote teams can break bias in hiring, and I'm happy to present that to you. So, let's get started here. Where are my speaker notes? Perfect. All right, great. So, bias is something that we hear a lot of talk about. I think the most clear or most talked about type of bias is probably gender, and it's probably gender. But bias is really a disproportionate weight that is in favor or against something. Okay. And it usually ends up in us as human beings being unfair. So I think it's really important to look at what bias can look like. It can be, like I said, we could talk about age, it could be gender identity. We often don't talk about things like class. It could be class, it could be physical differences, it could be someone's immigration status, which in some cases would impact. Maybe certain parameters about a job or a workplace, but in many cases, they may not actually be relevant. Marital status, your origin or your citizenship, if you've been arrested previously, maybe even your level of education. So, a lot of the times we see a university degree is required, or it's a very specific ask in terms of level of education. We also are really I think bias towards accents as well. So it could be accents from within e- a monolithic language like English. If you think about Britain, for example, or if you think about the United States, how there's different regional accents can have different types of bias, add different types of bias to the mix. We could be talking about a bias that exists when speaking a language that maybe isn't your first language. We have a bias of beauty. So there are countless studies that show that people who are uh, traditionally better, better looking or have the beauty ideals of a particular culture, have an easier time, are taken more seriously. And this obviously would impact how you would go along hiring a candidate. And of course, items like religion or the lack of religion. So the one thing that I want to state here is that in this presentation and what we're going to talk about today, so if you fix your bias in um, your hiring pipeline, it's not going to fix poor culture. It's not going to fix your ability to retain people that you've already hired. It's certainly not going to make your onboarding any easier. It may temporarily change some diversity stats, which, by the way, I don't think are any kind of barometer that you should be looking at in terms of whether or not your company is a diverse place to work. Uh, this presentation, we don't talk about the bias in psychological safety or in communication styles or in creating space for people to be heard. This is a very, very complex issue, and I in no way, shape, or form want people to come in thinking that this is, if you apply these principles today, that somehow your work is done. This is something that will always exist, and it's always about iteration and experimentation. So I think that's super important to keep in mind when we go through this. So in the initial stages, we want to look at attracting. So retracting, what are we what are we showing the outside world? Are we attracting the world with what type of content we put out on our Twitter, on our website? The other thing we want to take a look at is we want to assess, and we want to make sure that we are removing our biases as companies, as people within those companies, and that we're comparing those candidates evenly and equitably. So one thing that Convert does is that we are very specific about what uh, our ethos is, and we post that on our website. And I think that that is being really clear on a statement that you repeat through that hiring process, from very, very top in the funnel in attracting candidates through processing their application, even in the way that you talk to them if they don't get the job, is really, really important. So say what you mean and say what you're trying to combat, and be clear about how you are trying to do better. And don't be afraid to get it wrong. Just, be out there and be experimenting with it. So when we talk about attracting with intention, I think we need to really think about um, the candidate, or the persona, to take a marketing term, that we're trying to attract. If we try to be everything to everyone, we will be nothing to nobody. It really niche is where it's at. And if you're in sales or you're in marketing, you've heard this, niche down, niche down. And the attracting the persona is no different. So we want to be really clear about the type of qualities that we're looking for in a candidate, what that persona, what the ideal persona looks like in terms of subject matter expertise. And when we describe, when we have that in our mind's eye, when we go to attract that persona, we want to craft with words that avoid jargon, which avoid gendered language, of course, which are clear about what we are looking for. So, really being clear on that can help to attract the right kind of candidate. And by the right, I mean the right for your business, not right as in a person who looks like you or talks like you. So then the third thing is sources, and we really want to be cognizant where our particular applicants may hang out. Are there Slack groups, industry specific Slack groups? Are we talking about LinkedIn groups? Are we talking about a particular community on Twitter, for example, or Facebook groups? These are really, really important to understand. Is it Stack Overflow? Is it in Git? Like, there are there places, rather than just paying for promoted ads and doing keyword searches, because often we need to put ourselves in front of candidates that we want, rather than hoping that they're going to come to us. So being proactive about that. And for promotion, we want to amplify that with intention. So source your candidates and be very, very clear. And sometimes, like, as a small business, we have the ability to get really granular about what that looks like. So are we then becoming members of groups where these type of candidates that we want hang out? And then are we engaging? Are we then becoming a source of integrity? Are we showcasing what our company is about in terms of values? And then can we get talent into the pipeline through those means? All right. So we talked about words. This is from Textio, which there are many tools available, some free, some not, that talk about language in posts. And this is pretty interesting, using AI to be able to craft your post. And you can see here that it gives you a score. It gives you a sliding scale on whether it's masculine or not, or if where the age range might be appealed to this. So looking at what your ideal persona is and crafting to that is one way, because you want to have a bias towards the candidate that you're looking for, but you also want to strip out the things that are really unimportant. The other thing that we do at Convert, which I'm really, really proud of, is that we assess anonymously. So anonymization allows us to really strip out what we were talking about in the beginning in slide 3, talking about beauty, class, accents, gender, all of these things. And when we look at, I'll get back into that in the next slide, but when we assess anonymously, we're talking about assessing soft skills as well as hard skills, subject matter expertise, and mindset. And the way that we do that is we use the same questions for all candidates on a scoring system that could measure, for example, motivation and initiative, whether or not they have a growth mindset. And these are really important to understand when you have your interviewers, that they are using the same scoring system and that they're asking the same questions across the board. So anonymization, you can see here we use, in this case, in this example, there's a series of trees. Previously, we've used fruit, dog breeds, flowers. And what happens here is we pick a category you can derive a lot of different names from. So each file folder here represents a different candidate, and each tree represents a candidate. So then what happens is all the collateral for each goes in there. So the disclaimer that I'll note here is that don't use things like dog breeds or cats, because those create their own bias. If you have somebody whose code name is poodle or Rottweiler, you're going to have a lot of baggage associated with those dog breeds, or how cute they are, or what someone's personal experience is, and that's going to really give a different kind of bias. So we don't use dogs anymore. All right, so when we go into the candidate anonymization, so they get a folder, and you can see here there's a LinkedIn profile, there's a resume, there's a GitHub repository, there's the applicant answers from any written items, and we really go knee deep or neck deep in anonymization. So here you can see that, or it's also called blind assessment. So you can see that in this CV, we've removed the information on where this person had been employed or where they were currently employed, the different places. And what this does is it allows you to look at really the skills that are on play here. So in summary, we need to treat hiring with the care and consideration that you would show your customers. Your customers are there to do many things, but they keep the lights on. And we can't expect that hiring comes in a different space, because we are really looking at people who make that engine run. So we need to treat them with the same care and consideration that we would take our prospects through our funnel, our customers, our post-sale support of what we would do. And we need to think about our candidates in the same way. The next thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we are attracting candidates by using a wide perspective and really assessing what traits are necessary for the job that we're looking to fill. If we don't need somebody who is detail oriented, then don't put that in there. or maybe there's a different way to write about what you're looking for. Could you think about transferable skills? Are you looking for a learning mindset, for example? Well, there's lots of people in different industries that maybe a lateral move could be really, really helpful in terms of instituting that have a learning mindset that might be fantastic fits for a role. The other thing you want to make absolutely clear that you do is assess with consistency. So you'll want to use scoring methods with consistent questions, and you really want to keep those applicants anonymous. And in real time, what that looks like for us is when I go in to do an interview with a candidate who's made it to a final round, I actually don't know their name until we get onto the Zoom call. So I know them as their code name. And then when we get into the call, then I actually know their name and I get to see them, and that's the first time. So really think about anonymity as a way to protect you from yourself and what biases you might have. And the last point is going back to what I said about experimentation, and that is don't be afraid to get it wrong. You really need to look at making some progress rather than none, and fine tune your processes every time you go through and you hire people, and take that time to make that assessment, that post-mortem, if you will, after you've hired, get feedback on what could be better and how you can improve those processes. So I think I've spoken enough. I would love to hear any questions that you have about anything that I've talked about today. So let's see here. Vlad, are we, do we have anything up? Let's take a look here. Okay. Okay, so we have a question here. Would you suggest using an outsourcing agency when hiring? Uh, no, I don't suggest that. I think that it could, I mean, I'm not saying that outsourcing agencies are bad. They definitely fulfill a need for a very specific type of hiring. But I really believe that you are your best advocate for what your culture is, what you're trying to sell or pitch yourself to be for that prospect. And you can do that best. So if you're working on a small scale, then I would say that outsourcing is probably not the option for you. If you have big scale, then absolutely. But you're really, really going to want to make sure that that agency understands intimately what you're about, who you're trying to attract, and how you actually, as a company, you need to think about how you're going to keep those people. Really affects how you imagine your hiring pipeline. So I hope that answers your question. Let's see here on LinkedIn if we have any questions. Okay. So, when recruiting internationally, how do you formulate your questions to remove country bias? If the candidate does not have the proper vocabulary to answer the questions, if English is not their first language, or is it up to the candidate? Okay. So I think so I'll use Convert as an example. So we're an international team. We're about 40 people. We're in, I believe, 15 countries. English is our language of operation. So all of us speak multiple languages. And the language that we use in speaking and writing is English. So you have to have a certain proficiency there. That's not negotiable. So, depending on what your subject matter expertise is, it may be more or less important. So, for example, if you are a if you're working in PR or in marketing, it's going to be a lot more important to have a fantastic grasp of the operating language. And if not, then say if you're working on back end technology, having great communication skills is still important. But the perfection or the standard that you might want from written or verbal communication might not be as high, for example. So, if they don't have the proper vocabulary or they don't have the ability, then it's up to you to really determine what that level of language should be and then act accordingly. I would never lower your standards in order to meet a candidate there, because you're going to run into problems when you're then trying to onboard them, have them make connections with people. Um, you know, Often with people who speak a second language, their listening is going to be much better than their speaking skills. And, that's totally fine, but you want to be sure that they can really make impact quickly. And so they can feel like it's a win too, in addition to showing you what they can do. I hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Morgan. It was pretty useful. We have a last question from Twitter. So, what do you think about hiring people from using social media as a finding talent?
I think it's amazing. I think some of my best hires have been from Facebook groups, to be honest. So one of the things in remote work that is really important is to be entrepreneurial, to be a good communicator, and because Convert is a 100% remote company, we were founded this way. It's in our DNA, and we have been doing remote for over 10 years. So we have a very specific type you have to have a very specific type of approach. I know a lot of people have learned to be remote in the last couple of years, which is great. I think that's a fantastic shift. But it's in order to, especially in so the, let me back up a bit. In order to do remote well, my opinion is that you also need to be really great at asynchronous work as well. Okay. Things don't always happen in the actual time that they're happening. And I think we're starting to see this evolution in remote work where, people have been trapped in meetings back to back. They're trying to recreate the synchronous nature of what an office looked like. And this goes to answer the question of this person on Twitter, is that when you go into, say, private Facebook groups that are geared towards entrepreneurs or freelancers, they're if they have been freelancing for a certain amount of time and been successful at it, they have exactly the skills that you want. They are great communicators, they're freelancing, they're good at managing their time, they work maybe in different time zones, they're used to working with different cultures, they understand prioritization, they know how to communicate in platforms that don't involve email, because spoiler alert, email is not the way that we should be communicating in this day and age. So getting people from social media into your pipeline, I think, is a huge, huge benefit. You already know that they know how to use some technology. You already know that they are assessing you from all points, which is what you're going to be doing to them as well. And having to be able to build a connection first, I think, is fantastic. So we've had huge success at Convert in using social media platforms to be able to hire people and keep them too, actually. So I'm a really, really big proponent of that. That's a great
Awesome.
question.
Thanks a lot, Morgan. And there is a last
You're welcome.
question. How do you see evolving in 2023? Do you see any crucial changes to the industry?
That's a good one. I think it depends on what type of industry you're in. So I'll answer the question with the idea that we might be going into a recession, that many people, or that we are going into recession, high inflation, people are being let go. I think we're going to see a switch to, or an increase in, more entrepreneurial freelancing type ownership that people have of their income. So we saw in the pandemic that people realized what was broken with work and with bosses. They realized also maybe what was broken in their home because they spent so much time there, and we saw this huge boom in, home renovation and decor and things like this. So you spend enough time somewhere and you realize, I, people going into 2023, and we've already seen this trend with quiet quitting, or AKA, just doing what you're paid for, and, setting boundaries. I think the interesting thing is, you can, nothing is guaranteed, right? So just because you're employed by one employer doesn't suddenly mean that they need to keep you, right? You're working at their whim, right? And I think we have this like false idea that if we're employed by a company rather than being self-employed, that's it's more stable. And I don't think that, we've seen that in 2022 and 2020 and in going into 2023. So my point being that we'll see this shift towards freelancing, but I use the air quotes for freelancing because I think that that's kind of a disingenuous term to use for entrepreneurship. A solo entrepreneur who maybe, for example, loves to work in marketing, but really loves to work for different types of verticals. So guess what? You can do that, right? If you are a solo entrepreneur. So I think we'll see people reinventing themselves in terms of niching down into what their transferable skill sets are. We'll see people getting more certifications, one-off certifications, to really quickly ramp up some skill sets. You'll see big companies offering more free training in order to get their products in front of freelancers and solo entrepreneurs. And you'll see a bigger market in places like Upwork and other sites that, for people who are high performing, are really, really fantastic marketplace. And you'll see employers on the flip side realize that there's a whole pool of talent out there that is professional, capable, and motivated to work. It just want it on their own terms. So I think you'll see a boom in employers of record so that companies can hire more internationally. And I think you'll see more international hiring of knowledge workers in 2023 and 2024. That's my take.
Right. Right, Morgan. We have another question from Francois. So thanks for addressing the freelancer point of view. But do you work with consultants? And if so, do you apply the same rigor in finding the consultants?
Absolutely. We do, and it's the same rigor. I think that companies do themselves a disservice when they make the disconnect between an employee and a freelancer, a contractor, because okay, so maybe in one particular small piece, if you're coming in for 2 months on a project, you don't need to know the ins and outs of, the company culture. There's certain details that really aren't like necessary for you to do a great job for a one-off project, for a very small scope of project. However, that doesn't mean that a company shouldn't apply the same rules and rigor that they do to communication with outside, contractors than they would to their own team. Oh, we need an update every Monday. Well, guess what? You're going to also give us an update every Monday, or things of that nature. When you're hiring let's say a freelancer or contractor for an extended project that may be indefinite, or it may be kind of on retainer, or maybe somebody who is working over 6 or 8 months, then absolutely I think that the company should be treating that person as the professional that they are, and giving them the not only the respect they deserve, but also bringing them into the team as a part of that team. Understand where your boundaries are, right? So maybe, for example, for particular that type of freelancer, you're like, yeah, I'm not really comfortable sharing, deep proprietary information. I'm not comfortable sharing financials. There's certain things maybe that you don't want to share in terms of really high level goals, but you could get into team goals and team OKRs. So those things I think are super important, because it also gives that person the ability to prioritize their work, to build bonds with their teammates, to really also feel that they're part of something, right? When we work in a remote environment, it's very, very easy to feel isolated. And I think that all these small things make a big difference in feeling part of a team. And when you're part of a team, even when you're doing small collaborations, it goes a long way in helping inform your point of view, and also your excitement about the work, right?
Absolutely, Morgan. That's a very
This
valid
this is
and
fun.
great insight. That's
This
right.
is really fun. Are
So
there more questions? I want to keep talking.
I don't see any questions, but if there is one thing you want the visitors to remember, it would be
I think we need to be aware and realistic about our own biases. So, as people, we're complex, all of us, and we all have biases to something that we have been ingrained in us in a very, very deep way. And kind of think back to that slide about like accents, about looks, about religion, about class, and these spread globally, right? Like, even for example, I was speaking to somebody from India the other day, and they said that based on a name, they can uh, have a pretty good sense of what religion or what caste this person could be from. And we don't have that in that type of attachment to name in North America. So it's a very becomes, I think, triply important, right? That we examine those things as people and then look to our own processes at work and say, do I want to be working with people who look like me and think like me? That's not great for creativity, right? It's not great for problem solving. And sure, you may have solved 100% of your problems thus far, but did you really get the right solution? Like, you don't know that. So I would challenge people to, just because you don't think it's broken, doesn't mean you shouldn't experiment and try and fix it. That's my take on it.
That's a great quote. Thanks a lot, Morgan.
Thank you.
I really
I should
appreciate
put
it.
it on a mug,
Our
right?
input. Absolutely. I'm gonna do that.
Yeah. All right, great. So was really happy to talk to everybody today, answer a few questions. Hope that you continue on your journey, either as an employer, if you're looking for talent, and if you're someone who is looking for work, then I highly recommend, taking the reverse action and really looking at where you're pitching yourself, how you're taking your persona out there, what kind of jobs you're applying to. You can't be everything to everyone. So, really niche down and find the right fit for you and take some bias out of what you're doing on a day to day basis, and you might surprise yourself. So, in conclusion, be brave and experiment often.